The United States faces internal discord and global skepticism over the efficacy of its recent missile and airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. A classified defense intelligence agency (DIA) assessment rapidly leaked to media outlets contradict the triumphant narrative advanced by the White House. While President Trump and senior administration officials proclaimed the operation as a decisive blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions, the DIA report concludes damage was limited, estimating Tehran's program has been set back merely months rather than years. This unprecedented public clash between U.S. intelligence agencies and the executive branch underscored deep institutional fissures and cast significant doubts on the mission's proclaimed success. Compounding the controversy, President Trump asserted during the NATO summit that Israeli operatives had physically verified the complete destruction of the Fordow enrichment facility, a claim met with widespread skepticism among regional analysts. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, meanwhile, engaged in diplomatic outreach, notably conversing with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Raisi emphasized Iran's inalienable rights to nuclear enrichment while signaling openness to negotiations with Washington, albeit on Tehran's terms. This posture directly rebuffed the U.S. demand for full cessations of enrichment activities. Simultaneously, significant frictions emerged between the U.S. and its key ally, Israel, following Iranian ballistic missile launch toward Israeli territory. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant pledged a strong reactions. Reports indicate preparations for major airstrike, prompting an irate response from President Trump. Utilizing his Truth Social platform, Trump publicly demanded Israel pull its bombers back, later engaging in what insiders describe as a highly confrontational, expletive-laden call with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump's intervention effectively halted the planned Israeli retaliation, reflecting his acute concern over preserving a fragile ceasefire he had touted as a major achievement, the so-called 12-day war. European leaders gathered at the NATO summit in the Netherlands responded to Trump's pressure with ambitious yet financially dubious pledge. Multiple nations committed to raising defense spending to 5% of GDP by the 2030s. However, economists warn these promises are economically unsustainable given Europe's existing sovereign debt burden, high taxation levels, and substantial social welfare commitment. Analysts like Wolfgang Muncho highlight that the proposed $500 billion annual increase could trigger a renewed sovereign debt crisis, dwarfing the 2010 Greek deficit debacle. UK Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer faced particular domestic turmoil, attempting to reconcile this pledge with necessary social spending cuts. On the Ukrainian front, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy arrived at the NATO summit aggressively seeking £150 billion in long-term European Union support. While President Trump met with Zelenskyy, expectations of substantial new U.S. military aid remain low. Trump's Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly cautioned against imposing bone-crushing new sanctions on Russia, arguing this would permanently shut down diplomatic channel crucial for potential ceasefire negotiations. Rubio's stance signals a pragmatic shift within the administration, prioritizing oil price stability and avoiding actions that could collapse communication with Moscow, a priority driven by Trump's acute sensitivity to domestic inflation and gasoline costs. The battlefield situation in Ukraine remains dire for Kyiv. Russian forces maintain relentless pressure across multiple axes. Key developments include Kharkiv theater. Russian advance continue near Libok and Lipsy, threatening potential encirclement of key Ukrainian units south of critical reservoir. Donetsk focus and tense fighting persists around Toretsk, with Russian forces making incremental gains. Novokonomishny, west of Pokrovsk, is reportedly near encirclement, posing a severe threat to Ukrainian logistics supplying the Pokrovsk garrison. The capture of Pokrovsk appears a primary Russian operational objective. Kherson directions. Russian troops are edging closer to the strategic settlement of Kharkiv on the Dnipro's left bank. Ukrainian forces launch localized counterattacks, notably near Sumy, likely orchestrated by Zelensky to project resilience and bolster his pleas for aid at the NATO summit. However, military analysts assesses this action as tactically limited, unsustainable, and unlikely to alter the broader operational trajectory favoring Russia. The potential fall of Pokrovsk would critically weaken Ukrainian defense across Donetsk Oblast. Amidst the military setbacks, concerns deepen regarding the Zelensky administration's endgame. Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak's recent declaration that Zelensky is indispensable and must remain president until the crisis is over is interpreted by observers as preparing for prolonged control despite impending defeat. Speculation suggests plans may involve either establishing a government in exile in a Western capital like Warsaw or relocating to Lviv if Eastern collapse accelerates, continuing to demand Western recognition and funding while pursuing symbolic NATO and EU memberships for rump or exile Ukraine, a move designed to institutionalize permanent Western Russian antagonism. President Trump's decisive intervention to halt Israeli strikes on Iran revealed a core strategic priority, preventing a spike in global oil prices. His public posts expressing fury at rising oil costs, quote, beneficial to the enemy, end quote, and the subsequent granting of sanctions waivers allowing continued Chinese purchase of Iranian oil underscore this imperative. The Middle East escalation has accelerated Russo-Chinese energy integration, with the power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline project now receiving heightened priority in Beijing and Moscow. Ultimately, Trump's aversion to another, quote, forever war, end quote, and the associated economic fallout appears to have overridden more hawkish impulse within his administration and the Israeli government, narrowly averting a broader regional conflagration with catastrophic global economic consequences. The episode starkly illustrates the enduring gap between triumphalist rhetoric and complex geopolitical realities. That's it for me for today. Hit subscribe now and smash that notification bell to be the first to know when major events unfold. Essential viewing is just one click away. More from me soon. Have a nice day.